Welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen, and enjoy my stories every day. In the muted glow of our suburban bedroom, the night had draped itself like a shroud, but sleep eluded me. The bed felt emptier despite Laura's presence, her silhouette barely discernible under the sheets. For weeks, her behavior had mutated from the woman I married into someone unrecognizable. I turned to face her, reaching out to brush a lock of hair from her face, but she stirred and mumbled something incoherent, turning away. I lay back, staring at the ceiling fan as it cut through the heavy silence. Laura had been returning late, her excuses flimsy and her smiles forced. My gut churned with a cocktail of suspicion and dread. I missed the days when our biggest worry was what to watch on Netflix. A sudden noise downstairs snapped me from my reverie. Probably just the cat, I thought, but the faint glow of candles flickering under the crack of the bedroom door suggested otherwise. Heart pounding, I slipped out of bed and padded toward the door, my hand hesitating on the knob. The whispers that seeped through were unfamiliar and chilling. I eased the door open and the sight that greeted me was something out of a feverish nightmare. The living room had transformed into a macabre scene, dominated by a large red circle painted on the floor. Candles flickered wildly around the perimeter, casting ominous shadows. And there, in the center, was Laura, naked, laughing, her voice mingling with those of 5 men, also undressed, who encircled her. Panic seized me, but before I could process the horror, a sharp pain erupted at the back of my head, and darkness swallowed me whole. I awoke to the cold touch of metal against my wrists and ankles, bound to our bed, the room lit by the same eerie candlelight. I tried to call out, but a gag stifled my voice. Laura stood over me, her eyes wild, a stark contrast to the woman who had gently kissed me goodbye that morning. "Laura, what is this?" I managed to mumble through the gag. She tilted her head, considering me with a detached curiosity that sent shivers down my spine. "It's a cleansing, Mark. You'll see, this is for us," she whispered, as if her words were meant to comfort. I struggled against my bonds, the cuts on my arms stinging with each movement. The coppery scent of blood mingled with the wax and incense in the air. As Laura returned to her ritual, her laughter mingling with the chants of her companions, the reality of my situation settled in. I was not just bound by ropes, but by the shocking betrayal of a woman I no longer recognized. Hours or perhaps minutes passed, the concept of time lost its meaning as I lay there, forced to witness the unraveling of my life. When dawn finally broke, the apartment was silent, the cultists gone, and Laura lay asleep beside the painted circle, oblivious to the chaos she had wrought. As I finally freed myself from my bonds, the weight of what needed to be done settled heavily on me. I could not let this stand. Revenge, a concept I had never entertained before, now pulsed through my veins with a clarity that frightened me. I would reclaim my life, but first, Laura's betrayal would be met with a reckoning she never anticipated. This was just the beginning. As I stepped out of the room, the plan began to form, piece by calculated piece. Laura's awakening would be to a world she no longer controlled, starting today. As the sun cast its first rays over the quiet street, I found myself outside, the crisp morning air helping to clear the fog of the night's horrors from my mind. I needed allies, people who could help me navigate the labyrinth I was suddenly thrust into. My first thought was Robert, an old college buddy who had since become a detective. If anyone could make sense of the madness, it was him. I drove to the precinct, my thoughts racing as fast as my car. The familiar face of Robert greeted me as I entered, his brow furrowing as he took in my disheveled appearance. "Mark? What in the world happened to you?" His concern was palpable as he led me to a quiet corner. I poured out the night's events in a hushed torrent, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Robert listened, his expression growing darker by the minute. "This is serious, Mark. It sounds like she's involved in something dangerous. You're lucky to have gotten out when you did. I need to stop her, Rob. Before it escalates further." I clenched my fists, the resolve hardening within me. Robert nodded, his professional demeanor taking over. I'll look into it discreetly. We need more information on this group she's with. Grateful, I left the precinct and headed to my next stop, a lawyer. I had an acquaintance, Diane, specializing in divorce and family law. Her office was a stark, modern affair, and she welcomed me with a sharp gaze. Mark, I heard you were in trouble. Robert called ahead. Diane began without preamble, ushering me into her office. We need to start divorce proceedings, Diane. And I need protection orders. She brought strangers into our home. There was a ritual, something dark. Diane nodded, her fingers tapping rapidly on her keyboard. I'll draft the initial papers today. As for the protection order, we'll need proof. Anything you have will help. I nodded, feeling the weight of the task ahead. As I left Diane's office, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. The chill ran down my spine as I read it. We know you talked to the police. Watch your back. The threat loomed large, but so did my determination. I needed more than legal and police protection. I needed someone who understood the occult, someone who could counter whatever Laura was involved in. The last visit of the day was to an old bookstore in the city's historical district, known for its collection on the esoteric and the obscure. The owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Alder, was reputed to have knowledge of the city's underground networks. Mrs. Alder, I need information on groups, cults, possibly involved in dangerous activities, I said directly, watching her reaction closely. She studied me with sharp eyes, then nodded slowly. I might know something. But be cautious, young man. These paths you tread are dark and full of peril. As she shuffled to the back of the store, returning with a dusty tome, my phone buzzed again. Another threat? No, this time it was Robert. Mark, we found something. Meet me first thing in the morning. Stay safe tonight. That night, as I lay in a hotel room, the weight of my isolation and the enormity of my quest settled around me. Tomorrow, I would dive deeper into this abyss, armed with knowledge and allies. Laura's descent into this cult had dragged me along, but I was no passive victim. I was a man on a mission, driven by betrayal but guided by the need for justice. The game was just beginning. The morning buzzes with tension as I pull up to the agreed-upon diner, where Robert promised revelations over coffee. I notice his cruiser parked at a slant, the engine still ticking as it cools. He's inside, hunched over a steaming mug, his eyes scanning the room until they land on me. Mark, over here, he calls out, his voice low and urgent. I slide into the booth, the faux leather squeaking under me. Robert passes a manila folder across the table. It's thick with documents, and photos peek from its brim. We've been busy since you left, he starts without preamble. Your story checked out. We found connections to a group known for some pretty dark stuff. My hands tremble slightly as I flip through the contents of the folder. There are photos of Laura, not just from last night but from several occasions, all at different, but similarly disturbing, gatherings. How deep is she in this? My voice cracks, the words barely a whisper. It's deep, Mark. And dangerous, Robert replies, his eyes never leaving mine. But there's more. We found financial transactions leading to a property upstate. Owned by the group leader, it seems. The diner's clatter fades into the background as my focus narrows. What's the plan? I ask, a newfound determination steadying my voice. We raid the property, today. With your identification, we've got enough to go on, Robert states, but there's a hesitation in his tone. You should stay back, though. It's going to get messy. I shake my head, pushing the folder aside. I'm coming with you. I need to see this through. Robert eyes me, then nods reluctantly. All right. Let's gear up then. The ride upstate is tense, the cruiser's siren silent, the morning mist still hanging low as we approach the property, a rundown farmhouse, secluded by dense woods. The raid team is already in position, a silent nod the only communication as we join them. "Stay behind me," Robert whispers as we approach the back entrance. His hand rests on his holstered gun, his body tensed for what might come. The door crashes open under the force of the battering ram, and shouts fill the air. "Police! Hands where I can see them!" I follow close behind, every sense heightened. The house reeks of incense and something fouler, the walls lined with bizarre symbols and faded photographs. As the officers clear each room, the tension escalates until we burst into the main hall. There, surrounded by relics and candles, stands Laura, her expression one of shock that quickly morphs into fury as her eyes meet mine. Beside her, a man, presumably the leader, stands defiant, his followers scrambling as officers cuff them. "Mark! You shouldn't have come!" Laura screams, her voice piercing the commotion. I step forward, Robert's hand on my arm a silent warning. "It's over, Laura. It ends now." As they lead her away, her shouts linger in the air, a chilling reminder of the divide between us. Robert claps a hand on my shoulder, a grim look on his face. "We'll need statements, evidence from you. It's not over yet, not for the courts." As the farmhouse grows quiet, the officers rounding up evidence and suspects, I stand amidst the chaos, the morning light now filtering through the broken windows. The path ahead is fraught with legal battles and personal recovery, but the first steps toward justice are underway. This isn't just the end of Laura's descent, it's the beginning of my own reckoning. As I step back into the daylight, the weight of the ordeal is both a burden and a call to move forward, one determined step at a time. The courthouse looms large as I approach, its stone facade a silent testament to the gravity of what's inside. Today is the final day of the trial, the culmination of weeks of testimonies, evidence, and heart-wrenching revelations. My steps echo in the marble hallway, each one heavier than the last. Inside the courtroom, Laura sits with her defense team, her posture rigid, her eyes avoiding mine. I take my seat, the wooden bench hard against my back, my heart pounding in anticipation. The prosecutor, Ms. Thompson, stands, her voice clear and resonant. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've shown beyond a reasonable doubt that Laura was not merely a participant but a key figure in a dangerous cult, leading rituals and influencing others into criminal activities." Laura's lawyer rises, his tone smooth and rehearsed. "My client was herself deceived, manipulated into believing she was part of something spiritual. It was coercion, not voluntary participation." I watch, my emotions a tangled web of anger, betrayal, and a desperate hope for closure. As the closing arguments wrap up, the judge announces a brief recess before the jury deliberates. I step outside, the air cold and biting. Robert joins me, his expression somber. "No matter the verdict, Mark, you've done everything you could." I nod, about to reply, when a woman approaches. She's unfamiliar, yet there's something about her demeanor that commands attention. "Mr. Caldwell?" she inquires, extending a hand. "I'm Vanessa, I worked with Laura. I need to tell you something important." Curiosity piqued, I lead her to a quieter corner. "What is it?" "It's about the cult. Laura wasn't just a member. She was trying to expose them from the inside. She was gathering evidence of their illegal activities to bring them down." My world stops, the words slicing through the noise and chaos. "What? Why didn't she tell me?" Vanessa's eyes soften. "She wanted to protect you. The leader, he found out about her real intentions and forced her into deeper involvement as a punishment, as a warning." The pieces fall into place, a bitter puzzle of deception and misunderstood intentions. As the weight of this new revelation settles in, I'm torn between relief and renewed grief. "We're ready to reconvene," a bailiff announces, and we return inside. The jury files in, their faces unreadable. The foreman stands, a slip of paper in hand. We find the defendant, Laura Caldwell, guilty on all counts. A collective gasp fills the room, Laura's face crumpling in despair. Our eyes meet, and for a split second, I see her, the woman I loved, scared and alone. The judge pronounces the sentence, but the words blur into the background. I rise, my legs shaky, and as I pass by Laura, she whispers, barely audible, "I'm sorry, Mark. For everything." Outside, the sky is a dull gray, mirroring the turmoil inside me. Robert claps me on the back, offering words of comfort, but they fall on deaf ears. I walk, not knowing where I'm going, driven by a need to escape, to breathe. At a small park, I stop, the autumn leaves swirling around me. The truth of Laura's intentions, her efforts to do right, haunts me. I realize that our parting is inevitable, marked not just by the betrayal but by the tragedy of her sacrifice, misunderstood until the end. As the leaves rustle and the wind whispers, I make a decision. I'll start anew, far from here, but I'll carry the lessons of these harrowing months with me. Betrayal and deception had marked the end of my marriage, but understanding and a glimpse of Laura's true intentions offered a small, painful solace. The final chapter closes on a note of solemn resolution, the intrigue and misunderstandings of love and deception leaving a lasting imprint on my soul.